Greetings, Dennis Fair, retired member of the Metropolitan Police Department with 29 years of uninterrupted service, retiring June the 8th of 2019. All of my opinions are from my experience in law enforcement and my professional opinions. I'm not affiliated with any law enforcement agency. So what you get, you're getting it from me. I like to start off like that because you never know who's watching the video for the first time. So kind of give you an idea of my background or what have you. Gun ownership, that's a hot topic. Legal gun ownership, obviously. A lot of individuals are not necessarily comfortable with firearms in their home, and I can understand that. You got children, you got a significant other that from time to time you all might get into heated altercations. And to be honest with you, some individuals actually have violent and physical altercations. Now, you wouldn't know this, obviously, because not every domestic situation in a home is reported to the police. There are a lot of situations that I remember going to scenes, and we would get there and you could tell that they had been fighting, but if the husband's saying that nothing happened and the wife is saying nothing happened, and you don't see any necessarily marks on an individual. This was long before the whole OJ situation, where basically nowadays if you get to the scene and this, you almost have to try to find a reason to make that arrest, because obviously if that house is destroyed and it looks like something obviously took place in there, but the individuals are still, saying that nothing happened, and you may have a woman that her clothes are a little bit, in a disarray fashion, and the gentleman's shirt might be torn. You got to really do some serious investigation before you walk away from that. Years ago, you could do it, two adults, they could handle it among themselves, obviously, but then you got situations where you leave a scene and come back again, and one of them is dead. So then you're in a trick bag. As an officer, it's on you because you didn't take the appropriate action the first time. So those are things to take into consideration as well. Individuals, obviously, down south and areas where gun ownership is not really a big deal and it's just the norm. You might see an individual come into a gas station with a 45 on his hip, because that's an open carry. They may have open carry laws depending on where you are, especially down south. A lot of individuals, in their homes are gun friendly. The children, as soon as they get a legal age, they have guns. The girls start off maybe with like a BB gun or a pellet gun, but as they get older, they buy real guns and they take children shooting, which it's become a normal thing, especially like hunting and things like that. When you think of guns, you don't always have to think of somebody killing someone, although in DC, for the most part, when you think of guns, you're not thinking of individuals going to do anything recreational with the weapons. A lot of these weapons in DC, unfortunately, you got more illegal firearms in DC than you do legal firearms. That's why I encourage individuals, if you do meet the requirements to obtain a firearm, it's something to take into consideration. Now, obviously, it's not for everybody. Some people just naturally have a fear of guns and don't want anything to do with them. They don't want anybody to have one in their home, and that's understandable. However, I think that, especially in DC right now, I think it's better to get caught with a legal weapon than not get caught with one, based on what's going on as far as the pandemic of crime in Washington, D.C. Now, obviously, the individual recently, a couple of days ago, I think maybe a night ago, in Annapolis, legal firearm owner, supposedly some children were breaking into his home. It's my understanding that it was a prank that possibly went bad. They were kicking on his door, banging on his windows. Make a long story short, obviously a 10-year-old and a few others were shot. 10-year-old female, which is kind of obviously odd. You got to ask yourself, where were the parents? But then again, nowadays, your children go out or what have you. If you're not exactly with them or right there at the spot, you don't know what the child is doing. You give it to the wrong people, or your child might be the wrong people, if that makes sense to you. Your child could be the one. But you have to ask yourself, 10 years old. They breaking in your house. I mean, that sounds kind of a little suspect. He was released on his own recognizance. He was charged. However, he's going to have an uphill battle because you have to prove that those children, or you have to more or less prove that you were in fear of your life. And then I've read that he discharged the weapon again on the ground as a warning shot because he didn't know if the children were in the area trying to ambush him. Now that's not legal anyway. There's no warning shot. If you pull a firearm out, obviously you have to be threatened, and it has to be something life altering getting ready to happen for you to do that. You can't just shoot a warning shot at the ground because you thought the kids were in the area. You just wanted to scare them off. And this is a situation where, obviously, based on what I'm hearing, this individual slipped through the cracks. Now, he probably met all the qualifications to legally own a firearm. Obviously, he may not have a criminal history. He may not have prior DUIs. He didn't have any handicaps. He didn't have any type of mental disorder. But these are the things that you don't see necessarily from a background check, that an individual shouldn't have a firearm because they'll just have a short fuse. There's no background check that's going to show that you have a short fuse and you can't control your emotions. So these are the things that you see individuals do. Somehow you have to ask yourself, well, how did he get a gun? He legally passed everything as far as the requirements, but obviously it's unstable. Now there's another individual situation that just happened. So this is kind of odd, but another individual was cleaning a handgun in Southeast. I forgot the specifics of the area, but he was cleaning his weapon. Somehow he fired the weapon accidentally, of course, negligent discharge, through the ceiling of the apartment that he was in. That bullet penetrated that ceiling and struck a gentleman, I believe was 70 years old, in the leg, and that individual died. Now, obviously, to get struck anywhere, there's a possibility that could turn fatal. What likely happened is this individual was struck in a major artery in the leg, because that's where one of the largest arteries is in your leg, and could have bled out, possibly. Obviously panicked. You don't know what's going on. You're sitting watching TV, and all of a sudden you're struck. You feel something, and the next thing you know, you're looking and blood is shooting out like a water hose. You're going to panic. And if you don't have someone that has a knowledge to make a tourniquet out of a belt or some form of clothing to tie that tight above where that blood is coming out to cut that blood flow up, you're going to bleed to death. And that's going to happen real quick if it hits an artery. It's not going to take a whole lot of time. You don't have time to make a phone call. You don't have time to do anything but cut that blood flow so that you don't bleed out. And this individual was a legal gun owner that fired this negligent discharge and shot this weapon accidentally into the ceiling. The likely chance of how this happened in a situation with a Glock, for example, in the final stage before you take the Glock apart, the Glock handgun apart, you have to pull the trigger. Now, the process and the stages, you have to obviously remove the magazine from the weapon with the bullets, and you also have to rack that weapon to get that last round out. If you don't do this and you pull the trigger, because pulling the trigger is the last stage before you can take the gun apart, you must pull the trigger in as far as the Glock. And that's a common weapon that a lot of people choose, because it's, for the most part, I'm not going to endorse it, but it's a very easy weapon to handle, unlike most of them, but it's a well-known weapon. So a lot of people go with that, and it's pretty reliable to the average gun owner. However, the final stage, you must pull the trigger. And for example, if during that process your phone rung or somebody was at your door, maybe you got a package, you got distracted, and you did remove the clip, but you come back after whatever you was doing distracted, you might forget that you never racked it to get that last round out. So you figure, okay, last stage, I got to pull the trigger. Pull the trigger, and the gun goes off. Then it occurs to you, you know what? I never racked it to get the last round out. And you're supposed to rack this weapon, and obviously, after you do it and you get that last round out, of course, after the magazine has been removed, you have to visually check this weapon and lock that slide to the rear to be sure there's nothing in it, just for safety. But if you are distracted, you had to go to the door, you answered the phone, you did something else, you get right back to gun cleaning, and you skip that last that part of that last process of racking that slide. In your mind, you feel like, oh, well, I did it, or it might not even cross your mind. You just feel like, I got to pull the trigger to last process. You pull the trigger, the gun goes off, and that bullet goes through a window or through a wall or what have you, and that's likely what happened. Now, the individual obviously that did it didn't have intent, but somebody lost their life because of your negligence. So there's going to be some legal accountability, and obviously this individual is going to have to, I would assume, retain an attorney. I mean, I personally, don't know the financial situation, but a negligent homicide is not something that you want to pick a court-appointed attorney. You know what I'm saying? This is you talking about your freedom, and you've just killed somebody. Obviously, you didn't mean to do it, but whether you intentionally did it or not, that doesn't help the individual's family. That doesn't do anything. Bottom line is somebody lost a loved one because of your negligence. That could have been prevented. Obviously, you weren't familiar with the weapon or you were distracted. Bottom line is it could have been avoided if you followed the steps and used the safety procedures that you are supposed to use, because distractions can do it. And like I said, to individuals that are unsure, it's something to give thought to, but you have to discuss it with your significant other, or just you got to give it thought, because nobody knows how your household operates. Nobody knows how many different people are in your household, or if your household is frequented by a lot of family members or what have you, or even if you're just not stable mentally yourself. Now, because there's no background or no record of you having mental problems, we all know family members and friends that we've come in contact with that, in our opinions, and probably your opinion as well, they have mental problems. And you probably say to yourself, I know me personally, there were several people on the police department that I'm just still to this day like, how in the world did they get on this job? How did they make it out of the academy? Because that's just the mentality they had. That's a whole nother subject, but we all know some individuals that just are not mentally stable in our opinions, but somehow legally they're considered sane, but we know different. We have family members and friends like that. So there is a process that some people actually get through the cracks. And if you are one of those individuals, you shoot a child for banging on your door or things like that, or you're negligent with the weapons. We've had individuals on my department, for example, that this is funny, but it's not funny. Female lieutenant, while on duty, I believe they went to a department store, if I recall correctly, and she tried on some clothes or what have you, and she left her gun in the dressing room. Yes, a lieutenant. A lieutenant. This is a fact. This is a lieutenant. This actually was one of my lieutenants at the time. This happened way before she came to my district, but she at some point went to a departmental store, tried on clothes, left the gun in the dressing room. What if a child had gotten a hold of the gun, or some citizen, and shot themselves or shot somebody else? Would have been on her. Bottom line is, this is supposedly a trained law enforcement officer. So that just goes to show you, if law enforcement officers can be negligent, obviously your everyday citizen is not immune to it as well. Now, this is an individual that carries a weapon every day as part of a job. So you would think that individual would use a little more caution, or be a little more, thoughtful as far as, you got a weapon, or maybe you shouldn't try clothes on a day with the gun. Maybe you should come back, or leave the gun at home if you plan on taking off your gun and clothes and things like that. But clearly common sense didn't kick in with this individual. To make a long story short, this individual, I would assume, is probably retired by now, but there's been numerous incidents of individuals I could talk about the negligence. We've had a few officers I knew that back in the day when Haynes Point was a spot to go to down on the water. We've had individuals that have taken their weapons down there, and somebody knew their gun was in there. The gun was just mysteriously stolen out of the car while they were outside of the car. Whatever. We have numerous vehicles broken into and weapons stolen, and that's one of the things they tell you can't do and you shouldn't do. You don't store your vehicle. You don't store your gun inside of a vehicle while you're in a particular establishment or anything like that. You can't do that, but individuals still do it. And until you get jammed up on something like that, especially in law enforcement, then maybe you'll, have some common sense. But as a citizen and a legal gun owner, you have to use a lot of precautions. It's a lot of thought goes into gun ownership, especially safety. And this is another situation that I had happen to two of my coworkers, and this is a very sad situation. They had a little girl. She was a toddler. I don't remember her age. Maybe she might have been 5 at the time. I could be wrong. But somehow she obviously probably saw them, as they come home. These are 2 police officers that are married. And they come home and they take their guns off, and maybe they put it on a cabinet or a china cabinet, something high. And it's my understanding that this child obviously saw them and constantly saw them do it, and the curiosity, this individual climbed up on a chair, got a hold of one of their weapons, and killed herself. Beautiful little girl. That's something that obviously both of them have to live with for the rest of their life. Now, they weren't terminated. They weren't brought up on criminal charges or anything. Having your child killed at your, basically, you have to call it like it is. Having your child lose their life because of your negligence is something that you'll have to deal with for the rest of your life. Now, obviously, that was a case where that weapon wasn't put in a proper location. The weapon wasn't locked. And they assumed that the little girl couldn't get to it. The little girl, it's my understanding, got a chair and pushed the chair to the china cabinet and climbed in the chair and was able to reach the weapon. And she shot herself. She killed herself. And I worked with both of these individuals, and they eventually divorced and what have you, and they both made it to retirement, and that's something that regardless they have to live with for the rest of their life. And it's something that you can't take back, you can't redo, you can't delete, you start all over. A situation like that can cost anybody their life if you don't properly store your weapon. They have all types of things that you can use, locks and things you can put on the trigger. You can obviously take the gun apart if you choose to. It's a lot, but these are things you have to take into consideration when you decide if you're going to legally apply for conceal and carry. Now, here in DC, there is no open carry, meaning you can't get a license to walk around, like, for example, down South Carolinas and places like that where you can just open carry. You can see the weapon, somebody come in the store, what have you. DC doesn't have that law. DC has conceal and carry. So obviously, you get a weapon that you're comfortable with, that's nobody says you got to get a cannon. Some people are very comfortable with large guns, so you might, if you want to, you could get a 357. You can get something like that if that's what you're comfortable with. That's a large caliber weapon. I personally don't recommend it. I recommend something that you're comfortable with, something that's not obviously super small, but something small enough where if you're going out, you can conceal that weapon without it being noticed. Now, obviously, it's going to be your choice, whatever you're comfortable with, or, obviously you're good with shooting. Obviously, go to the police range, and obviously a 357, for example, is a very large caliber handgun. When you shoot it, it has a lot of recoil, and it's not the most easiest gun to conceal. So that's obviously something you may not lean toward. Now, obviously, variety of different guns. I'm not going to endorse any. Of course, I did say the Glock, because that's a common handgun, the Glock, and it's very, for the most part, it works out, and most law enforcement agencies carry that weapon, but it's up to the individual purchaser on what they're like and what they're comfortable with. Now, I would encourage people that are considering gun ownership, to maybe go to a police range where you can rent weapons and things of that nature. And obviously, if you've never shot before, maybe it's best that you take a class, or get that out of the way first. If you are not familiar with guns or you're not comfortable shooting, you can go to a class and they'll obviously bring you along slowly, where they're not going to just put a gun in your hands the first day and let you do that. You'll go with the safety, different things of that nature, and marksmanship and what have you. Unlike the individuals that you see today, a lot of times you see some of these videos, these individuals robbing stores and carjackings and things like that in Washington, D.C. You'll see a lot of individuals with extended clips. These clips are hanging out of a gun. These clips don't even go to the gun. A lot of times individuals get aftermarket clips or what have you to hold like 30 rounds for a weapon that's only supposed to hold 15. They've got a clip hanging out of the gun, a magazine or clip, whatever you want to call it, that's holding like 30 additional rounds when it's supposedly only hold 15. These clips sometimes can be almost to the floor, depending on what type of clip you get. These individuals don't have a clue that the fact that you have an extended magazine that doesn't really go with the gun, first of all, it's going to likely jam. And not only that, it makes the gun extremely heavy. If you got a weapon that's only supposed to carry 15 rounds and you get an extended clip that holds 30, first of all, the gun is going to be extremely heavy. So you're not going to be able to hold that weapon straight with one hand for a very long time. And then most of these individuals that you see in some of these shootings where they actually capture on Ring doorbells, especially some of these ones that I've seen in DC, these individuals have no concept of marksmanship or anything. They're hitting everything but the target. They're just praying and spraying, jerking the trigger. When you jerk the trigger, when you are firing a handgun, that bullet is going to go everywhere but the target, because just a jerk. You can be fairly close to a target, and the jerking of that trigger will throw that bullet off. And you're 9 times out of 10 not going to hit the target. You're going to hit a child. You're going to hit somebody crossing the street. You might go through a window and kill an average citizen that's just sitting there watching TV. And this is what happens. You get a lot of homicides that are often committed unintentionally while someone's shooting at someone else, and the bullets come through somebody's car window or what have you. So, these are things that you have to consider when you look at these individuals out here on the street. And obviously, there's ghost guns that are easier to get than you can get a sandwich from McDonald's. So that's why I say, if you do consider gun ownership, it's better, in my opinion, to apply and legally get one if you can and you meet the qualifications, than to not have one and need one, and you got somebody putting a gun in your face and you got your child in the back. Now, obviously, nobody wants to be put in that position, but I think you do have a right to defend yourself and you have a right to bear arms. Because obviously, based on the criminal situation right now, the police can't help you. And I can speak for DC, because right now they're having a mass retirement. A lot of the officers are currently going to the police and fire clinic, and this is something that I have knowledge of. They're mass retiring because the climate of law enforcement right now, nobody is really going to stay along to do this job if they're eligible for retirement. Obviously, why take a chance on losing your whole pension by doing something that may be legal as far from a law enforcement perspective, but the citizens see it and feel like, well, you didn't have to do him like that. I know he had a gun, but you didn't have to shoot him. And that's a lot of second guessing going on now in law enforcement for the most part, where officers don't even want to do the job. They don't want to stop anybody. They don't want to conduct any type of traffic stops. And you think about, when was the last time you saw a traffic stop anywhere? Now, whether you're DC or you're in another jurisdiction, you don't see a whole lot of traffic stops. You don't see the police stopping individuals. You might have 4 or 5. Back in the day, individuals stopped on the sidewalk and they might be checking for drugs or wars. Police do absolutely the bare minimum there. And I understand it, and in a way, I don't understand it, because you took an oath to do a job, so why are you not doing the job? You still have a job to do. But on the same note, you do the job, and you get caught up, terminated, or what have you, who's going to pay your bill? So it's a tricky situation to be in. So I get it and I don't get it, but I'm going to stick to the topic. Gun ownership is something you really need to consider if you are comfortable. And I keep saying if you're comfortable. Some individuals are just not comfortable. They don't want any parts of gun ownership whatsoever. But honestly, it's something that you can look into before you even go to the process. You can go to a local police range, not police range, I'm sorry, a regular range. I'm thinking law enforcement. You can go to a local a shooting range, and they will rent you weapons. And you find something, excuse me, or you ask, what's a good weapon? Obviously, take someone or that has possibly has knowledge of guns, but you find a weapon that's good for beginners, just something to shoot. Obviously, you don't want to go in there and run a 357 and have it the recoil throw the gun out of your hand. Obviously, something that's comfortable that you can hold, that you don't have to worry about flying out of your hand. Obviously, if you're a first-time shooter, you don't want to get the largest weapon. You want to start off with something, regular, nothing crazy. And the people at the range, the staff will be able to help you with that and tell you what's best. Hey, if you're a novice or you're a beginning shooter, this is probably best, and you have somebody with you that's familiar with guns or what have you. And if you don't have anybody like that, you can enroll in a safety course where they'll, obviously have you shoot something that the other people obviously are comfortable with. They're not going to just pull out 357. They'll have something that's, regular. In most cases, it'll be an automatic weapon, of course, but they'll have something that be comfortable and it will work for everybody, especially if you're taking a class and you got some really certified good teachers that are patient, that work with you on the range. Obviously, excuse me, you'll go through safety and laws and things like that first before you actually go out there and shoot. You're not just going to be thrown on a range and just start shooting, and that's good. And most people, honestly, that haven't owned weapons or possibly haven't shot, make some of the best marksmen or markswomen. I won't just say men, but the marksmanship for those individuals a lot of times is very good, because unlike some of the guys, we might have shot before, so we think we already got it mastered. We'll go in there and we'll try to do our own thing. But you have a lot of females that are often better shooters because some of the women are not have no knowledge whatsoever of firing a gun, and they go in there and they listen to everything that the instructor tells them. They explain them, hey, don't jerk the trigger, focus on your front sight. It's going to be, recoil, but don't anticipate the recoil. Just pull the trigger back slowly. Stay on your target. And a lot of women follow this procedure, and the next thing you know, they got like a grouping that's so tight when they shoot that you're like, you sure you never shot before? And a lot of times they haven't shot before. All they did was listen to the instructions. Guys, we hear it, but we don't hear it. So a lot of times we go in there, we do our own thing, and of course those shots are all over the place. But it's something that I'm being honest. You really should consider it, and I'm telling you, I can speak on DC. Can't speak on a lot of other jurisdictions. DC is going to get a lot worse than it already is, because you don't have enough officers being retained, and you don't have anything as far as academy classes. And I was told, I don't know how true this is, something I got to research more. I've heard that they're doing a virtual academy. So I'm hoping that's not the truth, but regardless, with the amount of officers that are currently retiring, unfortunately DC can never catch up and replace those officers, because the budget or whatever they approved wasn't even half of what they needed. So spring and summer, you're going to see a major increase in crime. So I encourage you, if you are comfortable with the process, if not anything else, go online. And especially if you're a DC resident or you're looking to do something in DC, everything is right there. It explains to you what the qualifications and legal aspects of it that you are required to maintain and have to even get through the process. Obviously, You don't have to just apply for a gun license right away. Look at it and see if it's right for you, because there are a lot of things that, even if you do want a gun and legally possess it for conceal and carry, what have you, you may not even be eligible. If you have a history of mental illness, that's one of the things that could possibly flaw you, and you won't. Something, obviously we got some mental people, obviously, they have mental problems, but there's no documentation. We see them every day. Some of them are our own family members. But the thing is, you also have a flaw if, for example, you have a criminal history of violence, like some simple assaults or things of that nature on your record. That's naturally going to probably foul you out of the game, and you won't be able to get a weapon. Also, if you have handicaps and things of that nature, several handicaps and things like that, depending on what they are, that will make you not eligible to own a handgun. So it's a list of all types of things that, obviously you can read and see, like, hey, do I have this? Oh, what I did had an issue where a long time ago I had a nervous breakdown and the police did have to comment. If that's on the record, it's something that obviously is not going to necessarily in your chances of getting a weapon, but you're going to have a letter from a psychiatrist or something. Obviously somebody's going to have to, you're going to have to do a little legwork to make a long story short. You're going to have a psychiatrist or some form of document stating that you're okay now or what have you. DUIs and things like that, that's on there. I recall several things that are on there that if you have a history of recent DUI arrest, that's going to be a problem. What else? It's a lot of stuff on there. It's self-explanatory, and you can submit the application. If I recall correct, you can do everything online, but I would personally read it first and just see and give it some serious thought, because it is a big decision on gun ownership, especially if you've never owned one before. But based on the way the city is going, honestly, I would really give it some consideration, because I can honestly say what I'm seeing now with the Metropolitan Police Department and the lack of manpower and the juvenile crime accelerating like it is with no end. I don't see anything at the end of this rainbow but more crime. Of course, you got the mayor, they come out when somebody is a tragic situation, and they'll speak and do, I call it a political pep rally. You'll see the press conference, you'll see Chief Conte come out, and I don't know if it's a situation where he wants to do more and can't do more because of the mayor, but when you get people get killed and the prayers, and if you saw something, say something, call us at this number, that really gets old. That's old. You get the press conferences every single time and no action, and then constantly people are losing their lives. Like I said, the individual just got caught with a stray bullet over, I think, not for sure where that was, but a female was riding in the back seat. She had a child, and even if she didn't have a child, she had kids, and she got a stray bullet, and she's dead now because of these individuals just randomly firing at each other like it's the Wild Wild West. And then when you catch them, it's no real accountability. A lot of these individuals, when they pull the background of the history of their arrest, they got arrested like 15, 20 times. Like some individuals, 10, 15 firearm violations. Why are they still on the street? No accountability. And that's my thing. That's why I do these videos, and I encourage people, hey, look, subscribe, like the videos, what have you. I'm not doing this for any monetary or nothing like that. That's not me. But I'm just trying to give some people some tips as far as to what you should do and what you shouldn't do, and especially in a situation with gun ownership. I'd rather see somebody have a gun legally and not need it than need it and not have it. Somebody kicking your door in the middle of the night, you got your wife upstairs, you got your kids, nothing you can do but dial 911. And depending on the situation as far as the 911 call takers, you might get a record. Now that has happened before. It's no guarantee that you're going to get through. It's no guarantee that you're going to get a signal if a cell phone is your only phone of choice. A lot of individuals don't have regular phones or landlines anymore. You got a lot of times hope you get that call out, and you hope they answer. I'm just saying the firearm is something to take into consideration. Now, of course, obviously, if you have a firearm, you're going to have to store it in a legal area where no one can access it but you. And obviously, you want to still be able to access it in the case of emergency, where you don't have to put like 50 different numbers in the safe to get the gun. Because by the time you do that, the individual might be standing behind you, like, I'm gonna give you some time with the gun in your back, saying, "Look, I'm gonna give you another chance to get to your gun." But chances are, you're gonna panic and you're not gonna have time to enter 20 or 30 numbers. And that's why, like I said, be safe, but use common sense. Don't put your gun, if you decide to go that route legally, in an area where it's going to take you so much time to get to it that by the time you get to it, the crime is already over and you might be shot or your loved one might be shot. So, again, I encourage you to send the video to somebody that you might think that might need some type of motivation or a little knowledge on gun ownership. Send it, subscribe, like, or what have you. But I'm here to encourage you, if you're comfortable, of course, with the firearm legal ownership. I'm not here to tell you, oh no, guns are bad, or these. Not one gun that I know of has ever went off by itself. It just doesn't work like that, And you have to take it into consideration. Things are not getting any better, and you can consider yourself in a safe neighborhood if that's what you want to do. In my opinion, this is my opinion, there's no such thing as a safe place. The only safe place is in your mind. And that's it. Because any given time, somebody could kick in your door, or if you're in a so-called safe area, they might think, if you're in a nice so-called area, they might think, oh, okay, these individuals got some money. We need to go in their house or whatever. So you don't want to get into that mindset where you're relaxed and you think because nothing happens in your particular neighborhood that it won't happen. Again, I'd rather see an individual own a gun and not need it than need it and not own it. If you are legal and meet the requirements and all the situations as far as the mental, the physical, and all those questions on there, do you have any physical handicaps? Is there anything that will prevent you from owning a gun, as far as the criminal? They're going to do all the background stuff, but only whether or not you'll pass the physical and the criminal background check. But if you know that you are eligible and you could possibly get the weapon, why wouldn't you get it? Especially with the city in turmoil like it is right now. I encourage anybody, if you are giving it thought, go on the Metropolitan Police Department's website and just Google gun registrations for Washington, D.C. or conceal and carry for Washington, D.C. Now, you're going to have a lot of pop-ups come. These things are going to come like for attorneys and things like that. The one with the Metropolitan Police Department's website, if you're a D.C. resident, is what you want to look into. It's going to have everything on it. No, you don't have to jump right out there and do anything right away, but you can read. It doesn't hurt to read it. And you make that decision, because I'd rather see, again, you had a gun and not need it than need it and not have it. And that's basically it. But, take it into consideration, because it's just not going to get no better. And I'm telling you now, and by springtime and it starts to get warm, you can come back on this video and say, you know what? You were right, because it's off the chain. It's going to be shootings on a regular basis. And you already see these individuals targeting, even with the carjacking task force or whatever they supposedly have in Washington, D.C., Metropolitan Police Department. You can't chase unless it's an actual violent carjacking. In most cases, if it's a jump-in or hop-in, rather, where the vehicle's at the gas station, you get out to pump gas, they just jump in your vehicle while it's running and pull off. They can't chase for that. That's a no-chase situation. And in most cases, these particular situations, when these individuals take these vehicles, they're not even a lot of times charged with carjacking, because the person that was carjacked can't identify the individual that took the car because they have masks on. So you can't identify them. The most they're charged with is UUV, which is unauthorized use of a vehicle or receiving stolen property. You got a person driving the car, but you can't prove that's the one that took it, because everybody had on a mask and everybody's dressed in all black. That's another thing that I'll go into with another video. A lot of individuals, as far as on these crime sprees, they're dressed in all black because it's very hard when you say, hey, look, he was dressed in all black, or so and so, so and so, and then you got everybody in DC wearing black. So it's kind of hard when it comes down to prosecution. But that's a whole nother story. But look, subscribe. I'm gonna have some more videos coming. I got some stuff coming on juvenile crime, because that's a very serious problem, man. It's no accountability, but the gun ownership is really serious. And if it's some questions or something in relation to gun ownership that you are unsure about, you can leave a comment in the video and speak to me directly if it's something you're unsure about or things like that, because it's not that complicated. And the bottom line is, when it all boils down to it, it is your right to bear arms, and it's your right to have a weapon. A lot of people don't think that DC, or I couldn't have one in DC or what have you. The laws have changed. Now, there was a time where for conceal and carry, you had to write a letter why you needed a conceal and carry. Like, you have to write a letter, submit it to the chief of police or what have you, saying that, hey, I'm a business owner, or I'm the church. Say, for example, I'm the church accountant, and I deposit large sums of money each Sunday or what have you. Normally that was approved, but they found that somehow that's really unconstitutional. So now they did away with that. Any and everybody can have a concealed and carry. Doesn't matter if you have an occupation that's, suspect of being, one of those high-risk occupations where you're doing bank drops for a church or whatever. It doesn't matter. Nowadays, just a regular citizen is dangerous on the streets. So they did away with that. So it's no reason. You don't have to write a letter or submit anything. All you have to do is apply and meet the requirements. And guess what? You got a conceal and carry gun license. And it's my understanding, if I read that right, you renew this every 2 years. Now, of course, you renew it. You pay, I believe it's like a $13 fee or whatever. You might have to go through the safety course or what have you again or whatever. But you take this and you complete this, that's every 2 years. Why wouldn't you do it if you're comfortable with a gun? Legal gun ownership, of course. Every 2 years you renew it or what have you. And of course, obviously, the renewal process won't be as tedious as the initial process of actually going through it. Renewing it, obviously, you may have to do some certain things, but as long as you're still in good standing, you haven't done anything like got arrested or anything, or DUIs, or been committed to a mental institution or something that changes your status, you're good. Renew it every 2 years, and periodically clean your weapon, go to the shooting range, and be proficient, get proficient with it and things like that, and it can become a everyday thing, just like your regular jewelry or watch. You know what I'm saying? Hopefully you won't need it, but I'd rather see you have it and not need it than need it and not have it, or sitting around like one of your loved ones get shot or something happen, man. You saying to yourself, I wish I had maybe gave some consideration to gun ownership. Maybe my so-and-so, I don't like to even use terms like that, but maybe so-and-so wouldn't be in the predicament, or maybe I could have did something. You just don't know. And bottom line is, you'd rather have it, and I said it again, you'd rather have it and not need it than need it and not have it. And it's your right. Now, I know you may not be comfortable necessarily with owning a firearm, but it's your right. And it's something to consider, take into consideration. And you don't have to make a decision overnight. Take some firearm classes. I mean, you can go do all these other things, and people spend so much money on shopping. And why not invest in yourself? And to some, they be like, oh, no, I don't want that. I don't want a gun. Just do your research. I'm just giving you my perspective from a law enforcement aspect with experience. But on the same note, if I wasn't from a law enforcement aspect, right about now in DC, and not just DC, if you look all around the world, gun ownership almost to me is a must, because there is no such thing as a safe place. So take it into consideration, subscribe, share the video with somebody else that you might think that might want to own a gun legally, that might be considering it. And maybe, excuse me, if you got friends, you both apply at the same time. Maybe y'all work to do this thing together. You got a buddy or a girlfriend. If it's a female, you guys thinking about gun ownership, you're worried or what have you. Everybody doesn't have that shining light in their house or what have you. There's nothing wrong with a woman owning a gun. There's nothing wrong with it. As long as you're responsible, you are proficient with the weapon. They have all types of weapons for women and any and everybody else. If the color thing is something that you might want to consider, if you want to make it a little fashionable, you can get a pink gun. They got blue guns. They got all types of guns that fit your personality if you want to do something other than just a basic handgun as far as the color wise. I've seen them. They got some really interesting colored guns. Pink, fluorescent, what have you. The bottom line is legal gun ownership can be for you if that's what you want to do. But my thing is, just do the research. And if it's not for you, that's cool. But at least take the time to read. All you got to do is read. Just like you listening to what I'm saying right now. I do it just so you don't have to do nothing. You can get on a treadmill and listen to what I'm saying. You don't have to do nothing but listen. But at least I'm going to give you the information on where to go, what to do, and what to expect so you can make the decision if gun ownership is for you. Because I'd rather see you give it thought and then say, well, this is not for me, than not do anything. The websites are there. Why not? Okay, I'm going to close out. Subscribe, share, like, dislike. Like I said, I don't do this for money. This is just simply me giving some knowledge and trying to give back to some individuals. Because you're not going to see this on the news. They're not going to obviously encourage you to legal gun ownership. They're not going to encourage that. You're not going to see that. Of course, you'll see stuff like get the shot, get the booster and all that. Okay, I get that. But I'm going to give you the real stuff. Look into it, and at least you can make a decision for yourself by just reading what the qualifications are and just give it thought. Because it doesn't hurt to read and what the qualifications are. Only you know your background and things that may put you out of the perspective for gun ownership. Obviously, if some things that are hidden about you and you're on the sex registry or something like that, you already know. But for people that are actually eligible, that know that they have no issues or no flaws that's going to keep them from gun ownership, look into it and give it some consideration. And and if you are qualified, after all that's said and done, still taking into consideration of your household, your home, your living conditions, the relationship with your wife or husband or whatever significant other you have. If they're hostile and they become violent occasionally or once a year, gun ownership may not be for you. I'd rather see you decline or follow up on this and it end up being a fatal situation with you and your significant other or you and a child. Because children are curious, and that's something to take into consideration. If you do have children, you obviously have to discuss this with the child once you do get the gun, should you get one. It's not something that you're going to keep hidden from your child. They need to know that the gun is in the house. Now, as far as them accessing it or using it, okay, that's a whole different situation. But the last thing you want is a child to find a gun, or a young adult find a gun and start messing around with it and not even know it was in their house because you neglected to tell them. Curiosity. Once you share it with them, and if they are of legal age, take them to a shooting range and let them experience it. Once they shoot it, trust me, a lot of them, they're not gonna want no more parts of it, and they'll be familiar with. Some individuals may still want to shoot the weapon or be interested in it, but it's not something that you hide or what have you. Kids need to know what it's all about, because this isn't a thing where the gun goes off by itself. People kill and harm individuals with weapons. Guns do nothing alone. And again, I've said it before, down south and your rural areas, guns were just as common as plates. So, and you didn't hear about anybody shooting anybody or accident. You heard individuals going hunting and things of that nature. And as soon as those kids were of legal or age where they can go hunt, they took them hunting, or they bought them BB guns and things like that. It's all about responsibility and accountability when it comes down to gun ownership. So look into it, give it thought, share the video, subscribe. But again, and I'm going to predict this before it happens, once this weather warms up in DC, can't necessarily speak for everybody else. Well, actually, I could say the DMV, but I know for DC exactly. You're going to see the impact of the police of DC, Metropolitan Police Department I'm referring to, the retirements. You're going to see it for yourself once the crime becomes almost a pandemic. I wouldn't be surprised if they declare a state of emergency once this weather warms up. That's how less as far as police officers are actually on the street in DC, as far as the retirements, the COVID. Obviously with that, that's a whole nother situation. But a lot of officers that are eligible for retirement, why would they stay in these conditions? So you'll see exactly what I'm talking about once the weather warms up. But look, get that gun ownership some serious thought. And I'm out, and I'll be doing another video soon. Subscribe, share, do what you do. But if you got questions, holler.